are listening to Inside Voices on WNHHLP 103.5 FM.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and welcome to Inside Voices. My name is Georgia Goldburn. I am the Director of Hope for New Haven and the co-founder of Circle. And I am joined today by two amazing women from an incredible organization that we are so pleased and proud to be partnering with. We have been in partnership and fellowship with this organization over the years, but we are excited about the upcoming project that we have in place. We are joined here by Charmain Yun and Carolyn DeSchiffart. I've got that right, Caroline?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. From Christian Community Action. Welcome, ladies. Welcome this morning. How
Thank
are you?
you. Good. Thanks for having us.
Yes, thanks for having us.
Thank you. So I'm pretty sure many folks know in New Haven who Christian Community Action is, but our podcast is seen by folks outside of New Haven and outside of Connecticut. So do you mind just giving the audience, Charmaine, just an overview of what Christian Community Action is?
Yep. No, I'd love to. Christian Community Action, we're a homeless service agency that provides services for families experiencing homelessness in the New Haven area. Homeless services in general are divided between, serving individuals or serving families. And so we have, our realm is really in serving families. And we've been around for about 60 years. I think we're going on to 60 years soon, and we started out of just in the Hill area. Um, out of living room. It was called Living Room Dialogues, people coming together as lay people and clergy, trying to figure out how to put faith into action. And, after a fire displaced, I think three families, this group sprung into action and provided for a lot of the emergency needs. So it sprung out of that. And our mission really is to provide help, housing, and hope for families in need in New Haven.
Okay. And you have an extraordinary leader that just passed the mantle
Mm.
to you, Charmaine. Do you want to speak?
Yeah, Reverend Bonita
Oh,
Grubbs.
yes,
I think she was with the agency for 35 years, and had vision really and we'll be talking, I know, about the Arise Center later, and she had vision, to really support families on their journey to independence and to stability. And she had vision, she really led the agency and the community in this work of providing for families in need, and we're so grateful for her.
Oh, big shoes to fill.
Yes.
So you did allude to Arise Center, and we want to jump right into the Arise Center because that's really where the bulk of our partnership and our conversations with Hope for New Haven is and Circle
Mhm.
will form. And so, can you just talk and share with the audience the Arise Center, what that
Right. I
is
think
and what the vision
so.
is?
Yeah, I think it started about 2015, right? Before both of our time, actually. And um, it's a descriptor. Yes, we want to support families as they rise, move up, and move forward. But it's also an acronym. And this is where Reverend Benita Grubbs was very good with acronyms. And the acronym here is accessing, so accessing resources for independence, skill building, and employment. And she always mentioned how the key word is really in the middle, independence. And that's really where we want to journey with families. I think it was, we have emergency shelter, we have we meet emergency needs, but this was a place, I think, to be more holistic, more comprehensive in our services. And as we know, for families experiencing homelessness, or for anyone experiencing homelessness, it's not just having a roof over their head. It's a lot more than that. There are other needs, other barriers, and so the Arise Center was really set up to address some of those holistic needs. Um,
So I know you mentioned, this organization really, the catalyst for the starting of this organization were I think it was three families that lost their homes as a result of a fire.
mhm.
So what was the catalyst around the Arise Center? What was the need that was identified in the community? And again, going back to that middle initial I, independence.
Right.
I know
I
that.
mean, I think it probably we could see it in probably um, the two programs that we're operating right now, and we plan to we're hoping to be even more comprehensive. But the two spheres we're in right now is employment,
Mhm.
as well as, and this is where Carolyn comes in, the child and family services. But those are two areas, that we find with families, that we serve. Those are areas that we find that we can come and help support because those are barriers oftentimes to people um, maintaining their homes and having a permanent place of shelter. So I think for us, employment and child and family services are the two things that we're operating out of the Arise Center right now.
Mhm.
I don't-
Carolyn, do you want to expand on that a little bit?
I was just thinking that Reverend Benita Grubbs would always talk about a one-stop shop.
Mm.
So a place where people could come and they could receive the services for housing, but also for help for employment and then help with, I mainly work with mental health resources and childcare, and school registration, pretty much anything kid related. Um, so just having this place where people could come and they could receive all the services they needed to receive. And I think that's really the hope of the Arise Center is to be this place where people who are experiencing homelessness or housing insecurity can come and everything they need is right there.
Yeah.
You
Yeah,
know,
I think oh, go ahead.
no, you mentioned the mental wellness of
Mm.
families and that one-stop shop approach to this work. And I know people understand the housing component and the employment component, but can you guys speak a little bit more about that mental health and wellness component, and more specifically, how that impacts children and families?
Yeah. So people are, yeah, it's not as simple as like people aren't employed and they need to get employed, which I think sometimes is our default when we think about people who have housing insecurity, or like if they can get a job, then they'll be fine.
Yeah.
And we can talk about like what it means to be underemployed and housing costs and all of that. But I think what we really what we miss in those conversations, though they're very important to have those conversations, I think what we miss in those conversations is that there are deeper things happening
Mhm.
Mhm.
and that trauma is a real thing in these families' lives, in both the children's lives and the parents' lives. And that's not something you can put a band-aid on and then
Right, send
send
them
them
on
on
their
their
way,
way
right? Exactly.
and hope that it gets better.
Right.
So I think, yeah, why we focus on mental well-being here
Mhm.
is because we really believe that if a family is going to reach independence, we have to help the whole person,
Yeah.
Mhm.
and care for the whole person. And mental health is part of that. Um,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah.
I was going to say this idea of moving to stability, it's such a journey. People come to us in crisis and they're just, as Carolyn mentioned, all sorts of needs. And it's interesting in shelter, I think the goal that we've been given is, oh, they stay for 60 to 90 days. But that's, 60 to 90 days goes like just like that. And we know it's a longer journey, and that's the Rise Center is set up in a way where we can continue journeying even after they leave shelter, continue journeying with families on their journey and walking alongside them. So I love what Carolyn talked about getting to the root. And one example, for example, we offer these workshops that I think Carolyn probably knows more about, called Circle of Security, and that has a lot to do with helping parents understand the parent-child attachment relationship, and it goes deep. I think a lot of people end up learn. They talk about shark music, which Carolyn could talk a little more about, but those things that are at the root of how we grew up and things we didn't even, you know have any say in sometimes, and how that comes out in our child rearing and in our, caregiving, and how we can really tackle things like that and support families. These can be godsends in a lot of ways if we didn't grow up in a way that we can model things after. But I don't know if you have anything to say about getting
Yeah.
to the root.
Yeah, I think that you don't know until you know, right?
Mm,
Like if you were parented in a certain way, the idea of circle of security is that you're going to parent that way or not parent that way, depending on what your
mhm,
experience
Or
was.
parented at all.
Yeah,
Because
if you
because
were
you said
parented at
people
all,
parented, yeah.
right? And I think that, for example, we had one mom who grew up in an abusive household
Hmm.
who had a son who was very touchy-feely or very like um physically affectionate is a better word for it, who was very physically affectionate. And she was sharing how she had difficulties connecting with him because
mm,
physical touch was such a
like a trigger.
trigger or shark music, which
Mhm.
is just things that would normally be safe, but because of past experiences, feel very unsafe, even
Mm,
though they're safe. Um,
mm,
and through Circle of Security, through her seeing, through us referring her to mental health counseling, she was able to like hug her son and like actually connect with him in that way.
mm.
Um, which I think, yeah, that's what it's all about, right? Is that like growth and that change and getting to the roots of things instead of just saying you should be employed and then you get housing and then
Yeah.
you're fine.
Right. And it
Yeah.
sets the next generation up too,
Yeah.
right? So it's very, multi-generational in terms of our services. We think about
So,
things.
it's interesting you guys describe yourself as a homeless, delivering homeless services, but it sounds like, again, embedded in that delivery of services is so much more stuff that you have to tackle.
Mm,
And one of the things that we know is employment. And we're going to be talking about our partnership because this is the other piece of tackling the homeless issue, employment issue is childcare. And that's a piece that's not often discussed. But before we jump into that, talk about what are some of the things that you do around employment and type of employment services. You mentioned some of the wellness services with the Circle of Security. What are some supports that you offer for home for employment?
do you have? No, I'll start, but you can. Um, yeah, I think for us, it is not just as Carolyn mentioned, not just placing people into jobs,
Mhm.
but things like how to maintain the job, financial literacy courses to know what to do with what you earn and things like that. So we do offer, employment services like connecting to resources or having workshops on site or um, having partnerships, for example, with I guess American Job Center and other places like that. But also providing some of the other things too of how to, keep the job, the transportation, how do we tackle those kinds of things. And of course, as we're going to talk about, childcare is another thing in order to maintain these positions.
So the initial reasons why we connected with Christian Community Action years ago was around childcare,
Yeah.
because in our advocacy work at the state, we did a lot of work with making sure that there is funding in the child subsidy program for children and families that are experiencing homelessness
Mm,
and housing insecurity. And we did actually create a priority designation in the Care for Kids subsidy for families experiencing housing insecurity, right? So that was a success for us. And in doing this work, we discovered how childcare acts as a unique barrier to housing security and and securing employment. We understood the employment piece, but until we started working specifically with how families experiencing housing insecurity, we didn't quite fully understand how childcare, creates this really unique barrier for parents to successfully navigate a program like Christian Community Action. And we wanted to be a part of the solution because there used to be Life Haven. Life Haven years ago in New Haven used to offer childcare services specifically for families who are experiencing housing insecurity. But that center shuttered and nothing came about to replace it.
Mm,
And and just a little bit of a history with us is many families come to us that are experiencing housing insecurity. They want to first put their children in childcare so that they can secure employment and then move into secure housing. But
right.
many childcare centers cannot afford to take a parent who is not working and create a space for that child and that family. And you cannot secure childcare assistance through the Care for Kids program if you are not working. And
Right.
so for many years,
Like
parents were on this little hamster wheel trying to
yeah.
figure out how to make it work. So we ensured that those families could access the Care for Kids program and but they are still charged with finding and securing space because even parents that are well established, economically stable, find it difficult to find childcare spaces. So this is how our partnership has come about,
Yeah.
is to say we can give a parent a subsidy, but if they cannot find childcare, then it's really just half of that's a halfway solution to the problem. And
Right.
so our conversation evolved from years of conversation, and then we landed on a solution. So, Charmaine, do you want to talk about?
Right.
That was our journey at Hope for New Haven. So, do you want to talk about your journey coming into Christian Community Action
Yeah.
and how this partnership and this new vision is going to come into fruition?
Well, this really was, one of those stars aligning moments, right? All the stars are aligning, and I mean, to be honest, I've known you, Georgia, for decades now.
Yes.
My youngest daughter, who just turned 18, was a student.
Don't out my age, Charmaine.
She was a student, and we
Yes.
we little girl at like age 3 was a student at Hope for New Haven, and I remember it was just such a wonderful, nurturing, well-run, colorful, creative program. And, so I always knew that in my head, what, the kinds of services that, the quality of childcare that you do give. And so knowing that in the back of my mind, but then, of course, as you mentioned, and as Carolyn knows, much more than I do, just that, childcare can be such a barrier for families experiencing homelessness. Again, it's just the stars aligning, and a real divine moment here where we want to renovate our Arise Center. So Reverend Benita Grubbs had the vision to buy the church next door to us, to our main office, maybe about a little more than 7 years ago. And we've only been operating out of the basement. It needs a lot of work to get up really functional, up and running. And then, as we talked about what the space could be used for, part of the space we realized could also be used for something like a childcare site, right? And so that's where kind of the stars aligned, and it made sense, as we're looking for funding to renovate the center to make part of it very conducive to childcare, and it's right next to our shelter units too. So it just made sense to put it all together.
Yeah. And Carolyn, can you talk a little bit about what you have seen and experienced with families around childcare? Do you well, I'm assuming you work very closely with the other workers. And what do you call the staff that works with your families?
Family coaches.
Family coaches. So, what are your family coaches sharing with you about the obstacles and barriers that they often encounter around childcare?
Yeah, I think that so I mainly work with the childcare. So the family coaches refer families to me, or I see families when they enter into shelter and work with childcare. I think it's always very, very rarely does someone come in with children who are under school age
Mhm.
who has childcare already set up.
Hmm.
It's just a huge need. And yeah, and I think we like talk a lot about income and financial well-being when it comes to housing insecurity, but I think we also have to think about relational well-being.
Mm,
And yeah, this idea that you don't necessarily become homeless when you run out of money. You become
mm,
homeless when you run out of relationships.
mm,
Um, and this idea that like many of our families that are coming in don't have support networks, don't have family, or if they do, their family is unable to really provide financial security or childcare or all of these other networks of support that I think we take for granted
mhm.
in our lives. So I think that yeah, childcare becomes not only a question of like, can I afford to pay for childcare, but also a question of like, what are my support systems?
Mm.
Who in my life can I count on and trust to take care of my children when I'm in crisis mode, which is a much larger question than
You
how
know,
do we afford childcare?
no, Caroline, I think that you just said something that just like a light bulb went off in my head because I never thought about it. It's you don't become homeless because you have no money. You become homeless because you don't have the built-in relationship and support. Because certainly there are lots of people who struggle with employment, but they do have that familial and support in their sphere of influence in their
Hmm.
circle. And so, to the
Right.
extent that a family who's dealing with financial struggles can find somebody who can house them, certainly for a period. So it just, that's a really interesting way to kind of look at, the homeless issue. And again, the more I work and we work with this group and we work with this population, the more we're understanding again that homelessness is so much deeper than just whether I have the money to afford to pay rent. So thank you for sharing that and just having that light bulb go off in my head. So, so we are looking to partner with Christian Community, and we are looking to establish a brand new center in New Haven. And we are calling this Genesis Educational Center. And Genesis, we felt that was the appropriate term to connect with Arise, right?
Mm.
Because when you think about what we are supporting families to do. It is a rebirth, they are arising like a phoenix and they're being reborn into a new circumstance. So we felt that the term Genesis really does encapsulate what we are hoping to do with these children and families. And so, Charmaine, can you share with me the vision? And I'll certainly help. But share with me from your perspective, from your perspective, the vision of the Genesis Education Center at Arise Center.
Yeah, I'm glad I get to circle back on this because I forgot to mention another piece of all this that is just so exciting. So there's the first piece of, just removing some of those barriers that our families face. Again, it's right next to our shelter apartment units, and so that's going to be wonderful because that's another issue, right? Transportation
Mhm.
is another issue. So for it to be right there is really important. But the other piece of it, which is so fun to incorporate into the Arise Center, is the employment piece. And that's something we're so excited about. And we've already test cased it, right? With maybe, I don't know how many of our clients have gone through Circle, but the training program that you have for people to become childcare providers.
Yeah.
That's exciting to me because that's again part of the employment piece. And we even heard a story of one of our clients who hooked up with you at our last Homeless to Boldness, right? And she's now on her way to, to getting trained in being a childcare provider. And to her,
I
it's
think she's placed in employment.
she's placed in
Yeah.
employment, and it's just,
Yeah.
and I think even during the training time, you guys are, I think they're being paid, and it's
Yes.
just really, all of it, the gamut. It just is exactly what we want to be. Um, supporting our families towards. I think her goal is to be a second grade science teacher. That's kind of her
Wow.
her
So
goal.
good.
But you
Well,
guys have really, and it's become a family to her. That's another thing. It's, when Carolyn talks about relationships, it's not just a job.
yeah.
She's so excited about the people around her, the other staff, and she really feels like it's a family. So just in all ways, holistically, this Genesis Educational Center, we're really excited about, the potential and how we can work together to really support families.
Yeah. So the vision is to create 3 classrooms.
Mm,
Have an infant classroom, a toddler classroom, and a preschool slash school age classroom. And it's going to be about 16, 15 or 16 children.
15. Mhm.
15 children. Yeah. And it's going to serve primarily the clients that are in the your program. And we mentioned employment, and that's one of the things that we do really very well at Circle is we identify folks, train them up, and our training also um, pays the trainees full
It's
time.
amazing.
So we're putting them in a full-time training position where they're learning if they're interested in becoming childcare providers, and even family childcare providers. We train them up, and that training usually lasts, depending on our funding, about 4 months to a year or 18 months, and then we place them in full-time employment because of our relationship with the other childcare centers in
Mhm.
the area. We can identify folks, call them up, so these folks don't have to go out there again, going back to this support that we build around them. We're not just training them and say, hey, go on out and find employment. We are setting them up, we're bringing the employers in, and we're making the connections. And with Lynn, well, I won't share her name, but with this client that we worked with, we trained with her and we place her in employment. But it's not just employment, it's also getting them on a pathway on a professional credential. So again, the CDA, which is the initial credential, and then the associate degree and a bachelor's degree. So it's a holistic program, and this is what we're looking to do with this. And of course, we're a Christian center, and you're a Christian organization. So a part of the work that we are going to be doing is, and again, building up that resiliency and that independence is connecting them to the spiritual. And that's some of the things that we do. And I think one of the reasons why you connected so much with our program, Charmaine, is because we do build the spiritual into the work that we're doing.
Mm.
So as we're talking about the spiritual and our vision is continuing along this path, how do you balance? How do you envision balancing early childhood best practices with faith-based values in a way that feels inclusive, healing, and empowering? How do you see that work happening not only through Arise, but also through Genesis?
Yeah. I think to me, the essence of faith-based, I was thinking about this, the essence of faith-based is that we're all made in the image of God, right? And that means, there's dignity in each person and everyone is to be treated with respect and love and compassion, right? I think that's kind of the ethos of how we want our agency to be. And I know how you run things. And there's also this brotherhood and sisterhood amongst us. And,
Mhm.
and I was thinking about in the same way that I would do anything for my child or for my niece and nephews, right? To
Mhm.
help them succeed or to help get them on a better place, that's what I would do for kids that I run across, that come across me. There's this brother sisterhood amongst us where every kid that comes through, we want to see that kid succeed in the same way that we would our own family member. And I think that kind of ethos is something that we really want integrated into our services. And when I think about, I don't know if this is, the question you're asking, but when I think about, early childhood education, like
Mhm.
it's with that paradigm, right? Of giving them the best, giving them, you know,
And we've seen in our work again, um, oftentimes parents come in and they're looking for childcare. But again, as Carolyn referenced, there is so much more that's happening with families that
Mhm.
when we are delivering care, all of these issues start to present itself, and then it creates opportunities as well for us
Mhm.
to support families more holistically.
Mhm.
So, without kind of sharing any details, we know we talked about the trainee that you connected with us around the employment and the circle training program. Can you talk about another success story through the Arise Center that you'd just like to share with the audience so that they can get a sense of, the full, scope and breadth and depth of the work that you guys are doing?
Hmm. Yeah. When I was looking at this question, I was like, oh, there are so many. Um, but I think one was we had a mom with three kids under the age of four. And she didn't have any childcare and or her childcare had fallen through and she had lost her job basically because she didn't have childcare. So when she came in, we were able to connect her to a childcare facility that had by some miracle had enough space for all three
Wow.
of her kids.
And
And she,
how old were those three children? I know they were.
I think one, 2.5, and 4.
Wow. That's
Yeah.
a that's a two tough ages
Yeah.
Yeah.
to care for.
Mm.
Yeah. And I just remember her coming in and she was just like visibly moved that
Mhm.
she ended up finding a job and they ended up moving into permanent housing. But I
Mhm.
remember her coming in that first day after they had been enrolled, and it took a while because unfortunately that's part of it. But they had
Mhm.
been enrolled and she was like, I could hear myself think.
Oh, wow. Mm.
Um, I could breathe for the first time because she knew her children were safe,
Mhm.
right? And then she ended up getting a job and ended up moving to permanent housing. And I think she is thriving and doing well last time I talked to her. Um, so I think just the like, it's not only a place for children to be safe and to grow developmentally and to learn how to interact with their peers, but it also gives parents the chance to like breathe
Yeah.
for the first time when you're in survival mode, right? And the chance to breathe is like revolutionary.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
wow.
And for those of us who are parents, that makes so much sense. Even if you're not dealing with displacement or homelessness, with that, you can't even, you know, make anything to, I remember like looking for time just to use the restroom or to like, make a quick stir fry or something, where
Yeah.
you just don't even have time for things like that, much less, all the big things of life. But that really is a service.
Yeah. And, again, it's going back to the complexity of, causing insecurity, but more specifically and uniquely how that affect families.
Yeah.
Because, we don't always think about, we know instinctively as parents that regardless of your financial situation, that ability to breathe
Yes.
times is when I find a child care facility that I feel that my child is safe and I know I can go to work and I know everything will be okay. I have spoken to so many families that have that as a burden and a challenge for them. And so for many parents that walk through hope and they are saying, I can breathe because they're just been this their first child and they're so anxious and they're like, oh my God, is my baby going to be safe? And then the first question is, well, can I call like 6 million times a day? You have to tell them no. But a part of our work is really self-care around around care around those families as well, because we always have to think about the parent's transition as much as the child's transition.
Right.
But then when you now put that parent in this really tenuous situation of housing insecurity, that ability to breathe takes on a whole other context, right? Because it's not I'm breathing because I know my baby will be safe while I'm going off to work, but it's I'm breathing because my baby is also in a place that is safe and secure, right? Because we sometimes forget again. And I've seen so many of these stories on YouTube where families are sleeping in cars with children, families are traveling in cars with children. They can't figure out the food situation. And so, when they come into a childcare center, that's a place where they know for those hours, for those 8 to 10 hours, that those children are safe and secure in a space. And now that space is going to be connected to the Arise Center so that it is going to be a place that they've already trusted.
Mhm.
And so they already have that connection with that space and with those family coaches. And now they're going to be in a
Yeah.
facility where they know that their children will be safe. So
You just gave me an idea for maybe we could have some wall hangings in the foyer that say breathe.
yes, because again, even as we're doing this work, we really do take for granted what that mom said, it's the first place, I can just think and breathe. And we
Yeah.
sometimes we take those things for granted. And I so appreciate what you guys are doing for those families out in New Haven. So, when do we think that we're going to have the Arise Center in Genesis
Well, we
Center
are
up
we
and
are waiting.
operating?
We are waiting. We applied for the CIF community investment funds with the state. We applied in
Mhm.
early December. And we should be hearing, I think, in June. But we already have some money to begin initial work, and that money was actually helped us to actually get to 100% construction design. So we're shovel ready. We're ready to go. So, if we can get the funds, and feel free to advocate for us at the state level if we can get
Absolutely.
those funds with DECD and CIF funds, then we can start now
So you
to break
mentioned that
ground and
you,
to renovate. We're not, we're it's just renovation work within the
Mhm.
church. So.
Yeah. So you mentioned that you received funding previously. You got some funding. So is it through CIF, most of your funding?
No, the one previous was State Senator Martin Looney helped us get urban grant funding for initial, especially for planning, this to get to this point of being shovel ready to apply for this the CIF funding.
Okay. And I know we have secured funding
Yes.
from the United Way
Yeah, yeah. So
of
great
Greater New
partners. We just,
Haven.
I love our representatives, our partners they're
Yeah.
just wonderful, and
Yeah.
it really is together. We're trying to
Yeah.
move forward together, right, to help families.
So, assuming that you receive this funding in the next round of CIF, what do you think is a timeline for the project to move forward and from start to completion?
I'm a little shy to put any dates out there, so I'm just gonna
Okay.
leave that. Yeah, our director of operations will, but we hope,
But can we say year? Can we
we
say?
hope this year will, yeah, we hope to see something by the end of the year. Yeah,
Okay.
but
All right.
yeah.
And so, is there anything final that you just want to share about, um, well, I shouldn't say final. Is there any additional thing that you want to share around this work around getting grant funding?
Um, no, I mean, this would just be our, what we've always been doing, in terms of moving along with families and wanting to, I think the renovation of the Rise Center would really open up just new possibilities and help us to be even more impactful with families and increase accessibility. That's another,
Mhm.
right now you just go to the side of the church into a door, but we would, open the front doors. We would increase accessibility to the community. We want to be community space as well. So it really is all about accessibility and increasing our programs as well. Um, so, and you're a part of that.
We are certainly going to be a part of that work in getting the grant funding. And we are so grateful for United Way for actually helping us to secure grant funding. And this will be more specifically, our grant funding will be around the playground that we've secured funding for. But the other big grant funding that we are looking to secure, which is going to contribute to parent stability, is the Early Start Fund, because
Mhm.
Connecticut has a vision of um, of creating free childcare for parents, and it's not quite free. And we do want folks to know that it's not going to be free childcare for all families, but we do have to secure grant funding to pay to help to pay for those families. And we do want to also say that families that are experiencing housing insecurity, we have established a priority for them in the Care for Kids program. So, our role in this initiative is to ensure that the families have the funding that they're going to need to
Mm.
cover the cost of care while they're there. And then the other piece, we alluded to this before, the other big part of the Genesis Educational Center is identifying individuals who are in the program to work in Genesis. So it's again creating that full circle of support
Yep.
for families so that if people are interested again in working in childcare or working in education, the Genesis Education Center will certainly be a place where they can come and they will be trained. So the
True.
folks that are going to be working in the childcare center will be the clients that are being supported um, through um, the Arise Center. So so can you talk about for you all? Because I know your job is to find employment and your job is to find childcare. So from an agency perspective, this is a part of that holistic and independent vision. So can you talk about how you're gonna how that Genesis model basically helped to advance your vision and the work of the overall organization? Talk about some key pieces that it's going to help to address overall in terms of your program delivery, because we're specifically dealing with childcare as well as an employment opportunity.
Yeah. I don't know if you have anything to say about that. I'll start real quick that Arise. But if you have anything, Arise, even when you think about the acronym, I think the Genesis Educational Center really gets at all of that, right? Accessing resources for independent skill building and employment, right? And that's what
Mhm.
I feel like it dovetails so well with what Genesis is doing. So I would say, the independence piece, the holistic piece, the um yeah, nurturing, we talked you had a question actually before about this idea of trauma informed care.
Mhm.
You had this question about, what training and staffing supports are required for a childcare provider serving, children impacted by trauma and displacement. And I just think, that's an important piece of all this too. And I feel like your staff also have that kind of training, which is really important. Where, I think for me, I grew up in a, environment where there were just lots of rules about how children should be, behaving and lots of do's and don'ts, expectations for where a child should be at every level. But I think when you have trauma informed and people with cultural humility, you start having just a larger heart, and patience for things and things don't fit neatly into a box, but you can recognize, for example, signs of stress, or you can understand attachment issues, or, creating spaces for healing. And so I feel like in that sense, there's a lot of holistic understanding of it's not just starting any childcare center, but it's bringing that component into the work that we do.
And Caroline, do you want to add or?
Yeah, I might sound like a broken record, but no, I think that childcare is a real big barrier. And I have families who will wait 3 or 4 months, right? Even with the Care for Kids subsidy
Mhm.
to find a place that has openings or, yeah, they can afford. Um, and I think to just be able to be like, hi, welcome. Here's a space for your child that is safe and good and where they will grow and learn. And you can, yeah,
Mhm.
trust us. You can trust us with them. And
Mhm.
you can breathe and then you can move forward towards independence. I think that's a game changer.
Yeah.
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 Yeah, I'm thinking about even as you're saying, as you're talking about the trauma-informed care, Caroline, you mentioned that there are families that are dealing with their own trauma and that they're through the circle of support, you were able to help to address some of those issues. And I'm thinking about how having to go through a program, because a part of what we have to do in with our teachers is to train them around trauma informed care. And what's so interesting is when I'm talking to my trainees, because they're all moms, many of them are moms when they come in, and they're just like, I'm learning how to teach children to understand how children grow and learn and develop, and that we are building children's brain, and that the brain is being formed and being built at the most critical time between 0 to 3. And my practice as a mom is really even changing,
Yes,
you know?
definitely.
And so, we're talking about, that holistic healing, looking at trauma informed care, because they will have to go through those trauma, how to deal with trauma in children, and learning how that trauma is impacting their child, and learning as a teacher how to respond to that. But I can't I can't even fathom what a game changer it's going to be when you are a mom as well, having to identify that, yeah, these things are creating trauma, and this fight or flight that you have been locked in for so many years because of your own trauma. How do you start to identify that? And then how do you
Mhm.
start to tackle that? One of the things we don't, even as adults, as we call normally functioning adults, we don't understand our stressors,
Yeah.
and so to the extent that, yeah, for many of those families, I'm excited to think about what transformation will actually occur as a
Mhm.
result of them going through these training. Um, what is your, in the last 5 minutes, what is your hope and vision? And I know we all have hope and vision for our program, but what is your highest hope and vision for the Genesis program as well as the Arise Center?
I mean, I always go back to my vision for getting into this work in the first place. And in scripture, there's this beautiful passage. It's mentioned twice in scripture where it says, every person will sit under their own vine and
Mm,
fig tree, and no one will make them afraid. And it's just a beautiful picture of, and during the time of Solomon, actually, that's how people were living, because it was a real prosperous time of everyone having their own place, and their own place of flourishing, and no one will make them afraid, type of thing. But just that's the vision for a lot of the work that we do, that people will have, their own space, their own place to flourish as a family. Yeah, that really is, removing the disparity, removing the inequities, and really seeing that each person has that opportunity, right?
Yeah. What about you, Carolyn?
Yeah, I think it comes back to I think caring for the parents, but also caring for the children and caring for them together.
Yeah.
And just like if we can make a difference so that these children don't experience housing insecurity because we were able to provide them with a safe place so their parents could seek independence. And I think that, yeah, for me, it's about the kids and just making sure that they're safe and that we've had kids who have stayed with us who have grown up and come back and have been like, I didn't even know that was a homeless shelter. And I think that's our goal is to try to make childhood, even in crisis, as normal as possible, for the kids.
Yeah. I love
So,
it when I hear that.
yeah.
These kids are grown. Actually, recently in the past year, a student at UNH came back and was part of a sorority and did like a drive for us. And she said she was, she was a tenant here. She was a guest here and didn't even know, as Carolyn said, didn't even know it was a shelter. But for them to come back and be flourishing and blessing society as well it's really fun to see.
Well, my heart again is for the children and of course by extension the families. And my highest aspiration is that every child experience the childhood that I experienced, that they were, safe, that they felt loved, they felt nurtured, regardless of what's going on. And that's what we try to create at Hope. And that is definitely the environment that we are going to create in Genesis, making sure that every single child, regardless of what's going on outside, has a small haven that they know they can come in and feel safe and not afraid.
Yep.
And they can thrive in that environment. So in the last minute, can you guys just share? And Charmaine, I'm not sure if I shared at the very beginning that you are the new executive director. I hope I did share that, but just in case I didn't share that, you are the new executive director of Christian Community Action. And so in the last minute, can you just tell the audience where to get some more information on Christian Community Action and how, if they want to donate to this vision, how they can do so?
I guess the best place would be our website for now, CCA Helping, HELPING.org, ccahelping.org. And on there, you can see the different programs that we have, including the Arise Center. And, there's a button to click if you want to volunteer. We always have volunteer opportunities, a button to click if you want to donate, if you want to receive our newsletters, things like that. But that's probably the best place for now. Or come visit us on Davenport Avenue, 168 Davenport Avenue.
All right. And for folks who are trying to gain access to your services, is there a telephone number that they can call?
You have that number? Is it just
So
the main number?
so if they're looking for childcare or employment services, it's 203-777-7840. That's the number for the Arise Center. If they need housing resources, they have to call 211.
Okay. Well,
Yep.
thank you all so
Thank
very much,
you.
ladies. Thank
Thank
you for
you.
joining Inside Voices. I look forward to continuing our partnership. Thank you. Have a good rest of your day. Thank you,
Thank
audience,
you.
for being with us and listening. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
are listening to Inside Voices on WNHHLP 103.5 FM.